we can't maintain a human population of 7 billion or anything near that number. So any effort that aims for sustainability of the present situation is a hoax. I mean, there is no such thing. We can't sustain the present situation. The present situation is a accelerating train. And we can't sustain that. I mean, you know, at some point, either there's going to be a crash or somebody's going to put the brakes on real hard. So this then means that that we have to rethink what it is that we mean when we say sustainable. Because the greater the effort to sustain the present situation, the more cataclysmic will be the collapse that's in the making. The collapse of the current civilization, in other words. And that would not be anything unusual. It's the same fate that all past civilizations have experienced. So we're not, I mean, you know, we're not out of the ordinary in that respect. So again, any effort that aims to preserve and maintain the present situation is a hoax. And we should just, you know, not pay attention to that. Now, we'll come back to that point, and remember, I'm just defining some terms now, and this is the term sustainable that we have been talking about. The next word is future. The word future in the strict sense refers to anything after the present moment. You know, oops, I've just moved into the future, you know, we all have, because time's moving on, and we have gone beyond the present moment. The present moment has moved ahead. In practical terms, of course, we don't think of it that way. We think of the future as well, first of all, the present to be expanded a little bit more. You know, the present extends a little bit ahead and a little bit into the past. You know, the present is the time over which things have not changed very much, and they're not expected to change very much. So we have it depends upon what it is that we're talking about. If I'm talking about my personal affairs, the present may be a matter of a day or a part of a day, or it could be several days. If we're talking about national affairs, global affairs, the present might be, we think of the present time, not so much as a particular time, but as times, the present times. In other words, it could be weeks, years. If it's a time when things are relatively stable, we think of the present as extending over a fair amount of time. Now, when we refer to a future situation that is sustainable, and that includes human beings, in other words, there are people alive, we must mean a time period that begins rather a long time from now, beyond any of our lifetimes. And the reason is that the graphs that I've just shown is sufficient reason to conclude that. It's a time when humans have not merely proclaimed, but have actually managed to implement and to maintain a way of life on the planet that can continue for a long time, many generations, maybe 1,000 years. Indefinitely. I mean, not forever, nothing lasts forever, but for a long time. So that much about the word sustainable. The next thing I want to address is the next term is the human mind. I have invited you to think with me about a sustainable future. Thinking is an activity of the mind. The world in which you live is not the world that exists around you. The world in which you live actually resides inside you. It is the knowledge of the external world that you have accumulated over the years. Knowledge you continually update and add to in small ways through observations and your daily experiences. And your knowledge of the external world also gets diminished through forgetting, and it becomes obsolete because the world changes rapidly and you may not be able to keep up with all those changes that are happening. So some of the way your world that you have within you is the past world, and it already has changed. Now, the human mind, of course, encompasses a lot more than just a model of the external world. There are many memories of past experiences that you have feelings about, that you have motivations and desires and so on. So the mind is a very complex thing, but it includes a model of the external world that you have constructed over your lifetime and continue to amend and modify, and it's uniquely yours. No two people have exactly the same world that they live in. I mean, none of you right now can see me exactly the same way because you're all at a slightly different angle. So, I mean, you know, just in that very modest example, you can see the differences that you all have in apparently the same experience. Now, the feelings and attitudes that you have about your mental model of the world are often the triggers of actions. For instance, if you think of something that with which you have associated a pleasant memory, you may seek out that something again. Or if there's something that you didn't like, then you try to avoid that. So your actions will be guided not only by your memories, but also by the feelings that are attached to those memories. So that's as much as I want to say about the human mind. I mean, you know, we could spend lots of time talking about the human mind. One more thing is the external world, or the reality, or the shared world, the world that we all share. Humanity's home, planet Earth, is unique among the planets circling our sun. Conditions on the surface of this planet are such that they can support and sustain a vast variety of life forms. We have life forms that exist in the air, on the land, ground, and in the water. And ranging from microorganisms to huge animals, sea animals, and land animals. Our planetary home is infinitely complex, interconnected, and interactive in terms of the reality that this presents. And change is always going on all the time. So we might think of it or call it a process reality because it's always in process. I mean, even if you're standing still, you know, your body your heart is pumping and your blood is circulating, something is itching, and so on and so forth. There's always, even, you know, just in your own person, your own body, there are changes going on all the time, and of course going all around us. The air is moving, and finally, if you get down into at a very tiny scale, atoms are vibrating, and if we get at a very large scale, we have the solar system. The Earth is rotating and spinning around the sun. So these are all processes, the natural processes that are going on. Now, the human mind is, as we've already talked about the mind, but it's not very suited to encompassing even a very small fraction of all that complexity. So how do we deal with that? We do it by classifying what we experience, by focusing on selected snapshots of all this commotion, and usually at a scale that fits our sense perceptions. Patterns not too small and not too large for our unaided eyes is what we like to deal with. And changes that occur not too fast and not too slowly, and those are the ones that we mostly are aware of and think about. Now, from the ongoing sense perceptions that we have, as I already said, we've constructed a model of the external world that we remember. And that's the world in which you live and the world that you experience. The people we know are our memories of them, and the memories get updated when we interact with those people. And the person's activities are constantly guided by what goes on in his or her mind. So when we think about the world, we have to keep in mind the following. First of all, not only is it a vast interactive expanse of space that includes at least our solar system, because without the sun, the planet would just be a ball of ice, and without the moon, there wouldn't be any tides. So, I mean, it's a reality that extends beyond merely the surface of the planet. And not only are there myriads of geophysical processes and biological processes constantly at work, but there also exist the mental worlds of all the people who are alive. Billions of them. We have seen 7.1 billion now. And because they are in constant interaction with their surroundings, with their environment. So in other words, and that environment, of course, includes other human beings. There's all this interaction going on. Now, quite some time ago, I've given a name to that interactive reality. I called it the psychophysical complex. Psychophysical, the term psychophysical, reminds us that it includes not only the external physical reality, but also the internal or mental worlds of all the people in it. And complex alerts us that we are dealing with infinite complexity and with an ongoing commotion wherever we look, from vibrating atoms to slowly shifting tectonic plates, from ocean waves to bird migrations, not to mention, all the activities of human beings and so on. Nevertheless, within this vast commotion, we can recognize patterns that maintain themselves for some length of time and some for a long time. But most of them do change gradually with time. So a lot of the things that we think about are things that are more or less stationary over a fixed period of time. A mountain, a river, another person, you yourself, and so on. So let me summarize. That ends my terms that I wanted to talk about. Summarize that first, sustainable in a human society context is a situation or a set of conditions if it can be maintained or will maintain itself for an indefinite length of time, because we're not exhausting or destroying the conditions for that existence. The future, a time beyond the present, when some important parameters will have changed significantly. A mental world is the context within which a person's consciousness and thinking operate, and from where the person's actions get initiated. And reality is the psychophysical complex. It's not, so this is the big point, is that it's not just the physical reality. The usual idea is that reality is what you see around you. That's not all that is the reality. There are 7 billion mental worlds which are in constant interaction with that reality and constantly manipulating that reality. Now, we're ready to take off to talk about what it is that makes the present civilization, the world we know, unsustainable. Now this is a complicated matter, and we can only kind of give it a brief overview. And I'm going to be using some metaphors to kind of get a grip on some of these ideas. And here's the first metaphor. The first metaphor you may be familiar with. You've heard of the bull in the china shop. But you've probably all come across that as characterizing a clumsy person. But let's fill in the details. What does the bull say? The bull says, "Oh, weird place. There sure seems to be a lot of breakage around here." What does the proprietor say? "Hey, get that bull out of here." So you see, depending upon who you are, you see the situation quite differently. Now, if we're, as human beings, we're in that kind of a situation. We're part of a civilization, and the civilization is like a shell or like a bubble that we're inside of, or a geodesic dome, conceptually, not physically. And you can't see out. You can't see out and get a perspective on the overall thing. You just see yourself, because the walls are mirrors, so to speak. So as a result, we take our accustomed activities and way of life for granted. That's the way things are. And we complain about all the bad side effects that we see happening. Global warming, depletion of fossil fuels, desertification of lands, destruction of rainforests, extinctions of species, and some of the things we talked about. You know, and we say, "Oh, isn't that too bad? Well, you know, why is that?" Well, it's because of us. Now, and so what happens then is that people instead are focused on whatever the game is that their particular society is pursuing. And typically it's a game of empire, of increasing the level of comfort and variety of resources for the individuals of high status, while maintaining the masses satisfied just enough so they won't start a mutiny. And this game of empire causes a lot of grief and destruction, but that grief and destruction seems to lie outside the bubble. We don't pay that much attention to it. You know, the kind of graphs that I've been showing should be in the newspaper every day, updated, to see what's been happening. And the only time that I've seen anything of that sort has been the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which has been publishing on their newsletter The Atomic Clock. You know, how close we are to a possible nuclear disaster or nuclear war. So we don't think about the things. We are the bull. And, you know, we see the breakage. It's not me. I'm here. Why are these things breaking? So then the question is, how can we get a look at the situation from outside the bubble? Now I can sketch that only very briefly here, but and here's what I will postulate. Let's assume that some visitors from somewhere outside of out in space somewhere have come to planet Earth thousands of years in the future, and these are very savvy scientists and they've heard about there having been a civilization here on this planet that's gone, and they want to figure out what went wrong. What's been happening here? Well, making use of their very sophisticated measuring equipment and translating ancient texts they still find, they discover, they come to some remarkable conclusions. And what these all add up to is that this civilization had some major flaws which apparently could not be recognized by the people then living, or if recognized, could simply not get corrected. Now, the most prominent flaws that they discovered, I will list, and here they are. Again, this is what these scientists of thousands of years ahead are discovering after their research, or as a result of their research. And I call this Western civilization, although of course it's not just Western anymore, it's pretty much global. Here are the items, the main items that they come up with. They say these people have been unable to limit population growth. We'll talk a little bit about that. These people were engaging in constant warfare, armaments, and military, and so on, and a tremendous amount of resources were going into this non-productive and, in fact, destructive activity. Third, they had an almost global capitalist economic system. And of course, the scientists knew that that's an obsolete concept, because a capitalist system always has to grow even more, a capitalist economic system. Well, you can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. Capitalism is good when you want to quickly explore and utilize a new resource, and it worked very well in the early days of the United States, getting like for instance, railroads built across the country and so on. But in today's world, capitalism is an anachronism. But that's who we are, and that's what we do, and let's go ahead. We don't think about all the implications, and we don't have any alternative worked out. People think that, well, the opposite of capitalism is communism, and we don't want that. But that's that's just as bad. So there are other ways in which to operate than by means of a capitalist economic system. Then these people, say those scientists, they were enamored with giantism. Bigger and bigger organizations, bigger and bigger areas have to be managed by big central organizations, and so on and so forth. Well, that's beyond the capacity of the human mind. I mean, we have huge governments, huge organizations. This is a hand-me-down from the past. When things were much smaller, then you could do that. But the mind doesn't work that way. And the human mind can't keep track of hundreds of different factors and all their relationships. And so you get the problem of having echelons, and then the echelons have to be able to communicate, and this becomes a nightmare when you look at it from a system theoretic viewpoint. So, further, these people were exhausting the planetary resources. They destroyed their base of operation. Well, so have done civilizations in the past, and we haven't learned from that. So that's, and of course, the resources means also not just coal and gas and so on. It means also having fresh air, having clean water, having land in which to grow food and so on, instead of allowing it to become deserts and so on. And then the last one, this is a very subtle one, and I don't know how those scientists were able to discover this one here, but that there were life negative values. And they must have concluded that from all of the things that they discovered about the civilization. Life negative values means that life itself is not valued. That the important things are material things, not living things. In other words, in our civilization, we value machines. We might value machines much more than people because they can work harder than people can. And we don't value animals. We put them into tremendous cages, all these feeding, mass feeding things for cows, cattle, and live a life of torture till they get slaughtered. These are the outgrowth of life negative values. This couldn't happen otherwise. Yes?
I don't think I agree with you. For example, we know that millions and millions of songbirds, which we need desperately, are killed because people value their cats so much. And now Science News, which does tell us all the things you've been teaching us, and Science News is something everybody here should read. We know now that in Australia, the little mammals and their beautiful creatures are being killed by cats also. And yet people value life positive with their cats, so that they're everywhere in every society, stinking up yards and pooping all over the place. So I'm sorry, I do not agree with you that that's life negative.
Well,
I can't even have a bird feeder anymore because of life positive things for cats.
Well, you can say also we're valuing, all the people on our team, we're valuing them too. So in that sense, we're life positive. But I mean life, the valuing the life community and understanding the needs of all creatures and all plants, not just one and let them destroy. So I think you have an important point, and it's important to be aware of those kinds of difficulties, and that gets confused. I wouldn't call that life positive. I would call it life negative in a sense. So, yeah. But thank you. Okay. Let me see. Okay, so now, what I have shown there is a bit deceptive because it suggests that all that we have to do is get rid of those 6 things, and then we're all set. But that doesn't quite work. First of all, none of those items that I've listed are physically clearly delineated. They're not just one place and then we pack them all up and throw them in the dump. These are factors that permeate all of the society. They permeate us and our thinking and so on. These are things that are all over the place. So it's not something that you can just shift away. Furthermore, they are interconnected and interacting phenomena. They're mutually reinforcing, and I have a diagram for that, which is this one. Of the unsustainable present. I've just used these abbreviations here. Each of these little circles represents one of the phenomena that I have already listed previously. The war system, the capitalist economy, population growth, and so on and so forth. Now, if you spend some time thinking about it, which we won't have time to do today, you see that there are can draw in these arrows that I've shown. The plus sign means a reinforcing arrow. In other words, war benefits the capitalist economy, for example. So there's a plus arrow going that way. Well, we have the other way too. Capitalist economy benefits war. In other words, it produces the machinery for war, and so on. So this is a totally interconnected thing. So these factors that we have here are not just nice little packages. They're totally interwoven and permeating everything. We can't just say, oh well, let's get rid of these various things. I mean, look at war. War is a thing that people have been trying to eliminate, or many people have been concerned about the elimination of war for a long time. But, we can't even get a good handle on how to do that. It's not just a matter of, let's say, dismantling the Pentagon. The American war system is spread all around the globe. This isn't something that you can just eliminate. Yes?
I just wanted to make a point about language and how language is used to reinforce that. When innocent people die in war, we now call that collateral damage.
Oh, yeah, right.
We don't call those people.
Yes, right. That's
So
a good
our
point.
language,
Yes, definitely.
our language reinforces a
yes,
lot of what
because
we're talking about.
it diffuses the horror.
It's
so
a
to speak.
negative life value.
Yes. The idea of demilitarizing the planet, which is a nice one, is actually a very delicate affair. Because if you have established military bases all around the globe to stabilize the situation, you can't just pull one of those bases out, because this is like a house of cards. You pull one card out and the whole thing collapses. And we've seen essentially that with the now in the Middle East. War is a permeating phenomenon. For instance, World War I came to a stalemate in 1917, and there would have been some kind of resolution. The parties would have sat down and decided, okay, now we got to give up. But then the United States entered the war, and that changed the whole picture, and really put Germany down so tremendously, had a tremendous burden as a result of the Versailles Treaty, and people were suffering, and that way it was possible for Hitler to rise to power. And so as a result, the United States had to get involved in the Second World War in order to destroy Hitler as a result of having been involved in the First World War. Now we have a similar situation in the Middle East. The United States went in, destroyed Iraq, demolished the country. That gives rise to radical factions that will grab the power, and that's what's happening there now. We're going to have to be going in there again with war. So the war situation is a very complex one, and getting rid of war is not just a matter of dismissing all the soldiers. This involves a fundamental change in consciousness, and this has to be a worldwide transformation. So we're talking about something really big if we want to eliminate war. And in fact, that's going to be part of creating a sustainable future. So let me just point out what an alternative to the picture that we just looked at might be. Oops. What might a sustainable future look like as far as those 6 parameters are concerned that we were looking at before? Well, here is a list. There would have to be population stabilization. You know, people have been struggling on this for a long time, and that hasn't succeeded. This isn't an easy. Well, the Chinese have the only ones that have really made a serious effort at this. Instead of war, a war system, we have peace actively being cultivated. You have a, you know, I used the term at some point in the past calling a peace army. But I shouldn't have used the word army, because the word army, you think of war. So it's a peace movement, but it's not, that's not enough either. This is a whole transformation of how people think. That, you know, war is just not on the table. You never even think of, you know, it's just like thinking of machine gunning your neighbor. You don't do that. That has to be cultivated. That isn't something that's just going to evolve. Thriving local economies in place of a capitalist economy, global capitalist economy. Local, where people can see what's happening and understand and benefit from what's going on. Of course, there's trade and so on and so forth. And arranged in whatever fashion, cooperative, or whatever way it works best in that particular local area. Human scale instead of giantism. We keep things into small units that can be understood and overseen by the people who are involved. Not an abstract thing that, you know, that's just kind of being dealt with as a piece of paper. Human scale in actually the real world. And living lightly on the earth instead of the exhaustion of resources. So the whole thrust is on conserving and reconstituting the planet and life, all life forms. And that of course requires, goes right in hand with life positive values instead of life negative values. So you see, this is a way in which we can have a sustainable future. Now, if you think about this, you know, of course, there are many other parameters that we could list here, which are some of them are could be incorporated in what I already have. But I think if we had this much, all the rest would more or less fall into place. This is a mind-boggling task. I mean, you know, we're not going to accomplish this in my lifetime, nor in my children's lifetime. This is something that is revolutionary to the core and rejuvenating to the core. That's a completely different way of being, of thinking of what it means to be a human being and how to live on the planet. And that's what's involved in creating a sustainable future. Now, the thing is, we keep coming back to the very next thought. Okay, now what about the march in New York City, the climate march, and so on? You know, we got to do all these things. Well, what we have to do in order to get to this is to change human beings. People have to change. People's thinking has to change, because it's people's thinking that produces what's going on in the world. Remember, we talked about the human mind as being the actor, not your hands and not the machines. It's the human mind that is controlled, and the human mind has to run along different straights, along different tracks. We have to totally avoid the kinds of things that reinforce the existing civilization and begin to build the basis for a sustainable future. Now, that is, I'm going to have to go kind of quickly because we're running out of time. That is a task that well, it's very difficult. So not only that, but it's in many ways it's illegal. I mean, you can't get rid of the war system. What do? Bomb the Pentagon? No, you can't do that. You have to change people's minds. Changing people's minds is a slow process, and the older we are, the harder it is for us to change our minds. It has to start. It ought to start young, and that's why education would be, an important factor in laying the foundations for a sustainable future. Yes.
When you started out, you used the definition of sustainability as sustaining the present, and as such, it's a hoax. So if we define sustainability that way, there is no such thing. That's practical.
There's no such thing as, I couldn't quite hear you.
Well, I mean, you can't sustain the present because of the gravity.
Yeah, right.
So you call that a hoax, so that's not really a very good alternative. So now are you defining sustainability as it's on the screen now? Is that your definition of sustainability?
No, the sustainability is, I'm talking about a sustainable future. So I'm talking about I'm suggesting that there's a need to, if we want humanity to survive in some way, we ought to, and if it's more than just, a few people hanging out in a cave, you have to do a lot of groundwork to get that to come about. And so eventually then this can lead to a sustainable future. A time in the future when human beings have learned to live sustainably. And these are just some suggested guidelines as to what to have in mind when we do this thinking about a sustainable future. But thinking about a sustainable future is not bringing about. And we can't go out and campaign for it because a lot of these things will go against the grain of existing laws and so on and so forth. So you're in a bind. And what we have to do is it's a painfully slow and difficult process is to change people's minds before you can implement. Like if we take the people today as they are today and say, okay, let's take the peace case, the number 2. If you take all the people today and say, okay, January 1st we're going to start doing peace, and everybody's great, excited, and well, I wonder how long till the next war will start. People's minds haven't changed. Nothing will change. It's people's minds that have to operate along different motivations and different ways of looking at the world, different insights, and with life positive values. So this is a tremendous and challenging task. And of course, most people say, "Oh yeah, that's great," and then go back to what they've been doing all along. In fact, it's very hard to get people really interested in this agenda because it's outside the bubble. It lies outside of the domain in which we're used to operating and thinking. So the challenge is, first of all, how do you even get people to pay attention to this? And then it goes on from there. I've kind of come to the end of the hour, I think that's right. Yeah, I'm going to leave some time for questions, and I can, can answer, we can have a little bit further discussion.
So I think that the mode here is to, who has some questions about this new theory, this theory that I'm sure that we all have been thinking about the sustainable future and how we're going to live with each other, the whole situation. So Harry has said to me he's more than willing to take your questions, and the questions will involve conversations, which is about what this concept was created for, to have this discussion. So your questions are very welcome.
Yes.
Well, I guess this isn't a question. It's thinking about how we're seeing the results of the carbon dioxide growth in the cataclysmic weather events that we've been having for the last few years.
Yeah.
It seems like the event that you're talking about that will cause us to have to do something, the event is happening now. This is a start to the problem of excess carbon.
Yes, that's right, and that we certainly see those effects of global warming. Global warming and increased carbon dioxide. My experience is that when things get bad, that's not when people start rolling up their sleeves and trying to get to work on changing the way we're doing things. They're in the emergency mode at that point. And they don't, making these changes that I'm hinting at take time and a lot of thought and careful consideration. And there is a dearth of that when there's an emergency. People want to do something quickly. I was going to mention another metaphor that I wanted to bring out, and that is this one. If all the people are busy sticking a fist into one of the holes in the dike, who is going to move the village to higher ground? That's the kind of situation that we have. You see, the emergency demands immediate action, and the long run gets washed away when the dam breaks. So we have there's this dilemma. It takes, some people are going to have to decide, okay, I'm going to stop putting my hand into one of those holes, and I'm going to start figuring out how to move the village. The other aspect of that is that the challenges in those two choices are quite different. It's very easy to stick a finger into the dike, but moving the village, how are you going to do that? So that's a big challenge. So most people will opt at the immediate thing, and after all, and they get reinforcement because everybody says, "Hey, here's another hole. Quick, put your hand in there." And so we're trapped in that sense. I mean, these are some of the things why it's difficult to envision how there is going to be really a survival of the existing civilization, because we just don't have. I don't see the willpower and the groundswell, well, I mean, there's a groundswell. There are lots of people doing lots of different things, starting intentional communities. There are, all kinds of things going on, but somehow it's not coming together into a real transformational thrust.
So what do you propose? How do we begin? What small things can we do? Do you have some specific?
Well, 40 years ago, I started the New Environment Association. Now, New Environment is really a simplified verbiage for new psychophysical complex. We have to have a new psychophysical complex. People have to think differently. And the New Environment Association, has been going all these years. I thought at the time, well, even with just two people starting, each can, at least in a period of 1 year, get one other person involved, and then everybody gets a new person every year. And gee, after 10 years, we have 1,000 people. Well, we never got any more, even got up to 50 members. We have the membership fluctuates, and we have a nice and very intelligent and creative group of people, but it's it doesn't really take off. And there are a lot of ideas about we have ideas about ways in which we ought to be engaging ourselves. What kinds of training and what kinds of mind-changing activities we need to engage in. Like, for instance, nonviolent communication. If you want to move toward a world without war, you have to first of all being able to negotiate and to bring groups together and to settle conflicts. And nonviolent communication, as developed by Marshall Rosenberg, is a tremendous technique for that purpose. Reevaluation counseling, originated by Harvey Jackins, is a way of working through some of the painful memories that are often subconsciously held by people and tend to restrict our range of actions and so on. So I mean, that's another example of a transformational practice. There are many such things, and we have a whole long list of qualities that we want people to move toward. Then, once there's enough of a core, it might be possible to create a small community so that people can interact more and so on, and then and evolve on from there.
You've been talking about trying to change emotions in adults who believe in jihad or hating people of another religion or faith. I have little faith in that, but I would like you to talk about how you think preschool teachers could help children learn that you accept other children, and that would be a much, to me, stronger base for the grown-ups in the next generation.
Yes, and here in Syracuse, we've been fortunate to have a school that was doing that, or that is still doing that. Our son, my son Dan, went to that school, SIEE, Syracuse Institute for Enabling Education, which eventually, which was founded by Professor Robert Newman, and operated on completely different guidelines, and which has eventually morphed into what's called the New School on Jamesville, now still in operation at Jamesville Road, I guess it is. Our school system, basically, the American school system was designed to produce obedient workers. If we want to put it in a nutshell, we need children that are sensitive and creative and and have initiative and so on and so forth to do things. And SIE is an example of a school that was designed for just that purpose. And in fact, Bob Newman just wrote another book on this subject and has complete guidelines for how to set up a school like that. And it's a book called, let's see, We're All in This Together, A World Where We're All in This Together. So there are efforts along this line, and we have one right here. Yeah, and I think it's true. People, it's much easier to bring children up in a way so that they're not hampered, but their natural curiosity and creativity is further, rather than putting them into a straitjacket. And obviously the relations among races and religions and all this and so on, all has to be opened up, and a lot of these very discriminatory ways of thinking has to be limited. I mean, all religions, as far as I'm concerned, there is only one basic thing, and that is don't do to somebody else what you wouldn't want to have done to yourself. And as long as you have that clear, I think you have a good base to start.
I'd like to say that I think for all of us here, one of the main things is to begin to think about how we are really connected to everything else. If you think about the people in Syria, and you think about what's happening there, you imagine that what's happening to them is actually happening to you, because it really causes a lot of pain, to each of us to know what's happening in the world. And I think that, for example, all of us here, we're all basically older people, we go shopping. We need to think about what we're buying. We need to look at the contents of what we're buying. We need to think like, where was this grown? How was it grown? Who helped grow this? We need to be thankful for the rain and the sun and all those elements, but we need to think about migrant workers, who's getting the shaft from doing the kinds of things that we're involved in. So I think it's very important to do that, to always think about what we're buying as consumers, to think, all of us who shop especially, and to be very aware of what we buy. Sometimes I even feel like it's hard to know what to eat, because when you look at the list of things, the ingredients, what you buy, or if you're buying things from California, where I've been, where I see the huge, spraying the strawberries with chemicals, you just don't want to eat another strawberry that comes from California. So I think it's very important that we think about the connections that we have everywhere, not only with the food, but all over the world.
In all of your talking, do you think that the unsustainable characteristics are a human universal, or did it just happen to win out over everything else? And if it is a universal, then how would we change everyone's minds permanently without a very authoritarian top-down approach? Like with
Good
China.
question, yes. Well, I think we can. There's a lot that we can learn from native societies. Those native societies that still exist at this time obviously have a way of real sustainable capacity, or status, are able to sustain, have been able to sustain themselves in the face of growing difficulties. So it's not a human characteristic, the unsustainability, but it is part of the thinking, the sort of imperial thinking from which a lot of our concepts originate. I would say that.
Albert Einstein was asked, how will things change? And years ago he said exactly what you have said today. Things will not change until the minds of men are changed. So here we are several years after he said that. You're saying it. That's a long-range thing, and I agree with you. But in the immediate, in today's world, we have to do some things, not just think some things. And one of those things is to watch, I'm only talking about us in the United States, we have to watch who we vote for. We have to influence these people who deny climate change. We have to get them out of office. I mean, so we have to appeal to those people who elect them to show them the facts. I mean, I saw the St. Joseph Glacier in New Zealand in the late 80s. I have seen a map of that, a picture of that this year. That glacier is gone. I was in the Antarctic in February. Right after that, it's not because I was there, a whole ice shelf went into the ocean. I didn't make that happen. But, you know, you cannot deny the facts of what's going on. So, you know, the question is, how do we get to those people who are the deniers of facts? So, you know, there is going to be this march. I don't know that everybody knows about it, but it's September 21st, isn't it, in New York City. The Vietnam War changed when the middle-class kids had to go to war. You know, I have 3 sons. They didn't go to war. My grandson is 21, but he has to register for the draft. I mean, he was never taught to kill anybody. And if you get that 5-year-old and you teach that kid diplomacy and how to behave, when he's 18, he has to, you know, sign up for the draft. And then women wanted equal rights to kill, along with the guys. And now, you know, they go to serve. So there's a lot more than, I mean, it's almost mind-boggling. And I think you should have brought antidepressant pills with you. So that's another part of it. We have to laugh. And in the time of despair, you have to sort of laugh to, you know, carry on going.
Right, yes, but I do feel, you know, we're human beings, and we can get ourselves into gear at some point, and we should do it. And I mean, I think, you know, I've been trying to do this for, as I say, 40 years, and we have done a lot of study groups and over the years and activities, and you know, people were influenced. We don't have any particular result that we can point to as you know, that's been accomplished.
Just one more thing. I think we gray-haired people are the ones who need to be out on the street, because we have history, which the young people don't have. The World War I was supposed to end all wars, then there was World War II. If you look at all the wars since World War II, your mind would go, you know. We have a responsibility to do something more than we've been doing for our children and our that's our only hope, actually. And I thank you for doing this presentation, because it's really been right on.